The FBI and the CIA see it somewhat differently. Unnamed sources tell the Washington Post that the CIA believes Russia deliberately wanted to hurt Hillary Clinton and elect Donald Trump. The FBI says Nicholas Burns. Gentlemen, thanks so much for being here. Tom, I want to start with you. You worked at the FBI for 30 years. Why isn't the FBI as dead certain about a motive as the CIA is?
Well, Allison, the FBI normally tries to gather evidence to, substantiate claims that it would make. So they would want to have evidence in this case. For example, a couple of years ago, the FBI investigated Chinese government hacking into the U.S. and actually brought charges against members of the military operating out of an office in Shanghai. So the FBI will, get the information, but they want to be very clear if they're going to level accusations to a certainty that Russia meddled in the investigation, in the election.
But Tom, are you saying that the CIA doesn't need to have evidence to draw its conclusion?
No, they can advise, the other agencies of the U.S. government and the White House and Congress without having proof certainty. They can say, we believe, and it looks like, and it might be, and it probably is. They're able to make statements like that.
Right. Well, since you are FBI and you are law enforcement based, do you believe that Russia meddled in this presidential election?
Well, I don't know, for sure that they did. I mean, we're hearing that they did, and I'm a little bit suspicious when I hear statements like all 17 agencies of the intelligence community. Well, all 17 don't conduct investigations, particularly cyber investigations. So you have 5 or 6 that may have a consensus that probably Russia meddled, and it looks like they did, but you still don't have agreement on what was the motive, why would they do it, that it actually, and then there's no evidence that it actually affected the outcome of the election. And we know that voting machines are not connected to the internet, so nobody could hack into
Right, nobody's saying the voting machines.
Results.
I mean, it's mostly just the DNC and RNC computers. Ambassador Burns, what do you think? Are you 100% confident that this in fact happened the way the CIA says it did?
Well, there was a director of national intelligence, General Clapper, who said publicly that the Russians interfered in the elections. There appears to be no disagreement among any government agency that they did interfere. So I support Senator McCain and Senator Reid, who are calling for a bipartisan investigation. If these allegations are true, this would be one of the most dangerous anti-American acts by a foreign power in a long time. And so we owe it to ourselves to get to the bottom of it. It can't be about politics. It's got to be what's best for the United States. And frankly, Allison, I think that President-elect Trump's reaction, which is to criticize the intelligence agencies and in a very weak way, not criticize Russia, I thought that was inappropriate and unwise for him. He has to lead these people in about a month. He has to be the person who inspires confidence in them. And he ought to be supportive in public of the entire U.S. government.
What do you think about that, Tom, that the president-elect is saying that he doesn't necessarily trust the intelligence agencies?
Well, I agree with that, Ambassador Burns, about that. However, we just had the actual president of the United States, Obama, tell Fareed Zakaria that that it wasn't on his radar, intelligence radar, that ISIS was on the rise. And so here's a president throwing the intel community under the bus. And in that situation, you had General Michael Flynn testify before the Senate Armed Services Committee in 2014, February 2014, that ISIS was on the rise. You had leaders of Kurdistan telling the State Department ISIS is on the rise. So you had a sitting president really not believe or not act on intelligence that he was receiving that did affect directly national security. And, so Trump, the statements that he makes right now, he's not the president. He's not in a position to act. And secondly, I would go back to, the comment about Clapper saying in October, that means that preceding his comments, September, August, back into the summer, that the intelligence community, when it was starting to believe that Russia was getting involved in the election, we heard nothing from the White House about this. We heard no specific actions or threats. President Obama met face-to-face with Putin at the G20 in September. What comments were made then to threaten them and say, you better not, we're going to come after you if you interfere in our election. So now, after after the election, now we're going to have this big investigation.
Yeah.
And the other question I make on that is normally we come to a conclusion after the investigation, not before the investigation even starts.
Ambassador Burns, Tom Fuentes just laid out a lot of issues there. What do you want to respond to?
Well, I certainly agree that you investigate and you try to determine the truth, not the other way around. This can't be about politics, and that's why it's got to be bipartisan. I think all of us want to do what's best in the national interest. I think what bothers people like Senator McCain and Senator Reid and others is when partisan politics interject and people say we shouldn't negotiate. But here's the largest issue. The president-elect is weak on Russia. He has been protecting, in his comments, President Putin throughout the campaign. He's not criticized Putin on Syria or Crimea or the Donbass or Putin and Russia's allegations or offensive behavior towards the NATO allies, the Baltic states. And so we need a president, and I hope President Trump can be this president who stands up to the Russians and doesn't, in essence, look the other way when the Russian government may be interfering in our elections. He is the president-elect. He needs to begin to assume that role and begin to protect the government agencies, build them up, and not tear them down.
Ambassador Burns, Tom Fuentes, thanks so much for helping us understand this debate better. Let's hear from Chris.
All right, so what happens now that President-elect Trump is questioning that Russia influenced the election? Where does it go from here? We're going to get the bottom line with one of the reporters who broke this story. Next.